Hello, I'm Danielle Johnson, Vice President of the Long Beach Central Area Association. Music Untold is the event production arm of Long Beach Central Area Association. In honor of Juneteenth, Music Untold presented a screening, discussion, and Q&A of the film Slavery by Another Name on June 16, 2012 at Houghton Park Community Center. Slavery by Another Name is a 90-minute documentary based on Douglas A. Blackman's Pulitzer Prize-winning book that challenges one of America's most cherished assumptions, the belief that slavery ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. The film tells how, as chattel slavery came to an end in 1865, thousands of African Americans were pulled back into forced labor. Under laws enacted specifically to intimidate, tens of thousands of African Americans were arbitrarily arrested, hit with outrageous fines, and charged for the cost of their own arrest. With no means to pay these debts, prisoners were sold as forced laborers to coal mines, lumber yards, brickyards, railroads, quarries, and farm plantations. Thousands of other African Americans were simply seized by Southern landowners and compelled into years of involuntary servitude. Government officials leased falsely imprisoned blacks to small-town entrepreneurs, provincial farmers, and dozens of corporations, including U.S. Steel, looking for cheap and abundant labor. Armies of free black men labored without compensation, were repeatedly bought and sold, and were forced through beatings and physical torture to accept control by white masters for decades after the official abolition of American slavery. The screening, discussion, and Q&A was hosted by KABC 7 newscaster Leo Stallworth, with panelist Michelle Anderson, attorney, Congresswoman Laura Richardson, ordained minister Arthur Gray, and retired Judge Marcus Tucker, who died August 8, 2015.
We have a distinguished panel who we'll be visiting with for just a while here. We have retired Judge Marcus Tucker. Can you raise your hand? He's graduate of the University of Law. He served for a number of years back in the day as the first African-American deputy city attorney in his native city of Santa Monica, followed by private practice, appointment to Long Beach Municipal Court, and subsequently the Los Angeles Superior Court. Round of applause. Michelle Anderson is a career, prosecutor with the Office of the Los Angeles City Attorney. She has prosecuted a wide variety of cases, including manslaughter, domestic violence, drug, driving under the influence, identity theft, bait and switch, refinance mortgage, fraud scams, and loan modifications. Woo! Arthur J. Gray II has been an attorney for over 20 years. Right there, folks, Dr. Art was a deputy attorney for 10 years in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, prosecuting over 30 felony trials and 250 preliminary hearings. That's a lot of work, folks. Round of applause. Congresswoman Laura Richardson, 37th Congressional District. A round of applause for this wonderful young lady who made it her business to be here this afternoon. I'm going to take this mic because as we move through this event, we're going to give you folks out here in the audience an opportunity to talk about how you felt, what you saw as we talk to these panels. First of all, Michelle Anderson.
I think that when we have films like this, it's very important to share with the community, especially with young people that don't have these experiences and don't understand the richness of our history. It's not taught in our public schools. Our children don't get to understand the true meaning of slavery, the movements, the things that happen. They hear about the proclamation and they think that was the end of slavery. That's when it happened. Abraham Lincoln came along and it was no more. They don't understand the struggles that African Americans are still going through today. And I know before Alex Haley's Roots story came out, my parents didn't even tell us about our great heritage and about the things that my grandparents went through and the very events in slavery and stuff that happened in our own families. So it's a great privilege and an honor to see a film such as this and to share with everybody here today.
Well said. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. The thing that captivated me about watching this story is when I think about people, we so often think that slavery was way back sometimes when, so long ago, and all the oppression that happened was so long ago, but there are people who are alive today that this occurred during their lifetime. And that puts it all in context. It's not just that it was a different century ago. There are people who are today who probably undoubtedly sitting in this room, that these things happened when they were kids, and it could have been their parents. My grandparents were sharecroppers. The fact that these kinds of things still impact us today, because when you take into account things such as the vicious cycle of poverty and the things that affect generations of families from one after the other, you see how the effect of some things are still taking place today. But if you don't know history, you don't know why. But when you look at the things that are happening, and that has happened not that long ago, you understand, oh, this is why there's still the breakdown in the family unit. This is why there's still things that impact the development of our African American men. These are things that affect us in terms of how we move and develop as a people, because one of the things that happened as a prosecutor is that whenever I was doing cases, I would just give my little straw poll, and I would find out that there were so many young people whose parents were in prison as well. And their parents had been involved in the penal system too. So these things keep following along generation after generation, still impacting us today. And unless we do things as far as being aware of the things that we're supposed to be aware of, and specifically targeting the things that need to make a difference in those things, they'll continue to pull us down. But the first thing is awareness, because, I'm going to quote it, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Thank you.
Well said, well said. And one of the things we do know is that slavery would not have been abolished after all these years had it not been for black folk and white folk getting together and fighting this struggle. And many of our white brothers and sisters lost their lives in this struggle. So when we, Congresswoman Richardson, when we talk about this particular body of work, is this his story, our story, or is it our story that we should be looking at?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me, and would we give John Malwell and the team that put this together today today I'm out going to Juneteenth events, and it's kind of ironic building upon what we saw today. And what I want to say is this, to answer your question very directly. This is our story, and what I would venture to tell you is actually it's even more than a story. It's actually our life that we are still living today. That's a very important part, because the communities I serve, I still see, if you look at a definition of slavery, one of the definitions is bondage. And we are still in bondage if we have communities that are different based upon where people live. We should have good roads because we have good roads. It shouldn't be because certain people make a certain amount of money so they have good roads. Certain people have good supermarkets that sell fresh fruit in them and other communities don't. Certain communities have healthcare that's available, community clinics, services, hospitals that can provide care. Other communities don't. So to me, what this film shows us is just like it was hidden and held back before, I would venture to tell you that it's still being held back in a different way today. And the power of us seeing this is to say, okay, if they had to stand up, why don't we stand up today? And so that's what I got out of it, and I look forward to participating. Thank you for having us.
About a year or so ago, I'm sitting in an office, I won't tell you where, but I'm with a white executive friend of mine. And on the television, he's got a television in his office, there were a group of African Americans joined together singing "We Shall Overcome." He started laughing. I said, "What are you laughing at?" He's like, "We'll overcome what?" Like, you know, I'm a brother, right? But yeah, I don't know who you are. You're cool. You're not going to get up and, slap me or anything like that. I'm just being honest. He's like, "Can I be honest, Leo? Or I can hide now, and smile on your face." I'm like, no. What are you saying? He's like, "Well, overcome what? You people had years to overcome. We gave you everything you needed to overcome everything. But you chose to kill each other. You chose to go the route of drugs. You can't keep a father in the home. You got kids running around with no daddies, baby mamas." I'm like, wow. He's like, "Yeah, wow. We're done. We're tired. We can't get jobs. So overcome what? We're done with you people. Get it done yourself." Judge Tucker, in light of what I just said, how prevalent is what we saw?
First thing is, I had a lot of information and feelings of, I knew a lot of this in terms of vague feelings of disability that blacks were under, and to some extent are still under. But what I'm interested in is achievement. And what we've achieved in the face of such oppression. Now, usually you think of the oppression, at least historically, ending to some extent slavery. This totally debunks that myth. The thing that intrigues me is that power and money seem to be the root of human behavior during slavery, during the 80 years between slavery and the Second World War. And it seems to me that it's consistent with that thesis right now. Power and money still predominate. Now, things are totally different in many respects, because there's always some people that benefit and some people that are losers. Now, it seems to me what blacks have to be in this time, and any time, anyone, they have to be competitive. And it seems to me that your state of mind has a lot to do with your being competitive. Now, if blacks can achieve and persevere during the conditions in which this film showed, even with the problems that we have now, we can persevere, and we can achieve depending upon our attitude. Now, it seems to me that the big divide is your state of mind to some extent. If you're acting, that is, if you're acting, you're strategizing and so forth, you may be victimized, but you're not a victim. If somebody else is acting on you and you're always responding, then it seems to me you're a victim. And it seems to me what this film should be enlightening to young people is that blacks persevered and achieved in the face of all the oppression, that whatever difficulties and problems that we have now, we can certainly overcome them because of what we have overcome and what we have achieved in the face of all these obstacles.
Well said, well said. Some of you folks out here, if you've got questions, if you've got something to say, think about it. I want to ask Mr. Gray a question here. As the film showed us, when slavery was so-called abolished, or when it ended, African Americans were still being locked up and enslaved. When we look at our prison system today, full of us, full of black folks, okay? What similarities from what you saw and what you researched, I know you've done some homework, brother, did we see then that we see today?
Were you looking at my notepad just now?
No, sir. No, sir, but I was feeling you, brother.
Just briefly what my story was. When I was a prosecutor with the district attorney's office, and one of the last prosecutorial roles I had was that of a gang prosecutor. And I prosecuted a young man and he committed the crime, he committed a murder, and he was sentenced to 30 to life. But at the end of that case, there was no sense of real satisfaction because there were 2 lives lost. One went in the hole and one went in the grave. And that's what continually happens. Our law, people will talk about the things that happen in the criminal justice system. And when I was doing cases, I'd come to court, and people would come in there looking for justice, and chained up and ready to go back into custody. That's what I just saw, just us. And so when you go to prison, the frustrating fact is that African American men make up 6.5 times more of the total prison population in the United States than whites. There's 6.5 times more African American men in prison than there are whites. I have 2 sons, and when you think about the fact that all of our young men, and not more so our young ladies, have some contact with the criminal justice system in some way, and it affects them for the rest of their lives, there has to be something that we say we've got to do more. And it is still happening. One of the things that I did research after looking at this was the idea of the prison industrial system. The fact that there is an industry that is dependent upon the fact that we have a large number of people in custody and incarcerated. And it's so interesting that even going back to those days when convict leasing and peonage was done to help keep the economic system going of the day, we have another economic system in place that we don't even hear about, that is still being perpetuated. It still is, it depends upon the extensive population of prisoners, as I said, 6.5 times more of which are African American. So there's a system that still can be used today.
Hold on, Judge Harvey wants to jump in. Go ahead, sir.
Well, that is true, but the thing is, the question is, what are we going to do about it? See, that's the crux of it. The first thing is, I spent a good deal of my time in juvenile, and it seems to me you can determine by the 3rd grade who's going to have great difficulty because kids start dropping out in the 3rd grade. They don't drop out physically, but they drop out in terms of achievement. By the time they reach the 6th grade or so, they're really disadvantaged. Now, all these statistics don't mean that there's anything inherently wrong with the people that are involved. I don't think anybody in this room believes that. And so there has to be some way of dealing with these problems. And I think it's reading programs. I think it's enrichment programs. I think it's, as the kids get older, it's midnight basketball programs. It's a number of programs that deal with young people before they get into difficulty. And there has to be money spent on the young children prior to them reaching their teenage years. Because once they reach their teenage years, they are so far behind, it takes tremendous effort and tremendous motivation on their part and somebody else's part to get them up to speed. Now, I think we have a model that works, and I think we use it in sports. When you're in sports, they have a coach, and the coach there is there to encourage them, to chew them out, to do whatever is necessary to get them to perform, and young kids perform. Now, I can't understand why we can't use that coaching system for academic.
Well, let me weigh in on that, okay? Part of what you're saying is right on point, okay? I'm from Watts, okay? I spent a number of years in Watts, in the garden, until like 12, and then the rest of my years, I was in small town Texas, playing Texas football. I heard a coach, redneck coach, once say, if you herd them in here like cattle and put that ball in their hands, they can get some stuff done. Stalwart, pick up that ball and run, boy. To some degree, African Americans, and this is from talking to people, are viewed in sports. Some of my redneck friends, along with this redneck coach, said we look at them like cattle. You boys can run, you can jump. In terms of your ability to think mentally, well, who cares? As long as you can run, boy, run. So there is that thought out there. And in some people's minds, that's why African American athletes have the ability to achieve a level of success in sports, is because of that mentality. Now, I didn't say that's true. I'm just saying that's what some folks think, and that's what some of these folks have told me. And there are many others who think otherwise, obviously. And Ms. Anderson, in light of what this fine gentleman said and Mr. Gray said, who should actually be watching the film?
I think our young people need to be watching the film, and I think a lot of people need to be watching this film. I think families should be watching this film together. But one of the things that I'm impressed by is that it does reflect upon what our system does and what the institutions do. There was a recent study, I can't remember where it was from, but they were actually looking at schools and taking statistics about our children, African American children, to determine how many jails should be built. Now that is something that is very disturbing. We're using our children to determine how many facilities that we're going to need to house our male African Americans.
Now, if I can weigh in real fast, you know that the prison system is $1 billion machine, and there's some talk of privatizing.
It's already being done.
Go ahead and continue.
And I have 2 daughters, okay, and not that they may not marry in their race, but I hope that they would want to choose an eligible bachelor. And with all of our male counterparts being locked up in prison, I guess they're going to have to go visit, one of the prisons. But the other concern is that it's disenfranchising a whole population that won't be able to vote. Therefore, they won't be able to participate in the political process. Once you have a person that has a felony on their record, they cannot participate. Then they become disenfranchised. They can't get in a job. What do? Once you have this criminal record, nobody wants to hire you. Then you become unemployable, which leads to more crime. So there's certain things that we as a community have to look at and try to come up with alternative programs of what do we do to get people back into the system. And if you look at what happened in this film, you know, we all talked about the Reagan years and the trickle-down theory. This is a trickle-down consequence. A trickle-down consequence of slavery that is still affecting us today.
Not all of us, though.
Hold on a second here. You want to weigh in on that, Congresswoman?
Let me say a couple things. First of all, when I went to Congress 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, there was an injustice in the justice system that if a person was arrested with crack cocaine, they received a totally different sentence from a person who had powder cocaine. And it's interesting how sometimes laws, even within themselves, can discriminate. So here, a person could have even lesser of amount of the inexpensive cocaine and serve more time than a person who spent far more money and had a larger amount of powder cocaine. It took years for elected officials to fight to bring parity in sentencing. So when you look at some of the disparities that exist, there's a lot that we can do, but we have to be committed to keep the fight. And it amazed me when I first went to Congress of people who would make an argument and say that there shouldn't be a same sentence for the same drug, just provided in a different form. So I want to come back to the original question that I asked. I think we all have to ask ourselves, does slavery still exist? Does bondage still exist? And I want to give you an example. I had a young man volunteer on my campaign just recently, a couple weeks ago. A young Hispanic young boy who lives with 11 brothers and sisters in a one-bedroom apartment. Now, we can say, and I love Judge Tucker, and he's a perfect example of how you can rise above. But what I'm saying is, not everyone can rise above, I would argue. Because this family with 11 children, he does not have the same chance that you had or I had. He lives in a one-bedroom apartment where they don't even have food in the house. So when we say, well, why can't he overachieve? Well, how is he going to overachieve if he's hungry? We know statistics tell us that if children leave home and they haven't had breakfast and the only meal they're going to have is lunch, they're probably not going to excel to the same level as maybe some of their counterparts. So I'm going to push back and say, what I'd like to see us do is learn from what we saw in this film and say, does it still exist in some places in America today? And if it does, what can we do to help fix that? And I think there are many things we can do, and I hope to share some of those ideas.
Very well said. And, what's your name, brother?
Emmett Brooks.
Emmett Brooks, Brother Brooks, as the Congresswoman said, we need to learn from what we have seen here. Is there anything left to learn, or is this the right audience for this particular thing?
There's a lot to learn. The same thing we saw in the film is occurring right here today. I work with inner city ministries. We serve the homeless in downtown Long Beach. The peonage, the unjust, inhumane treatment is occurring right today here in Long Beach. I couldn't understand the judge saying the 3 of the 3rd grade level. This is all environmental. The change comes from behavioral modification. Change your behavior, you change your outcome. One person at a time. And this is what we try to do. I'm, as a psychologist, working with Greg Newkirk in inner city ministry. This is what I try to do. We try to teach, if you change your behavior, you change your outcome. It takes a while to do that. But this is what's going to happen because it's all environmental.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to play devil's advocate as I walk back here. Now, to some folks who might look at this, they may say, well, I'm sorry, y'all, but what on God's green earth does that have to do with right now? Heck, I lost my job 2 weeks ago. I was a carpenter and I can't find work. So why should I be touched by this mess? That happened way back then. That wasn't me. I didn't do it. That was somebody else. Can't we all just get along and get on about our business? Sister, from what you saw, was that back when, and we should leave the past, or should we still be talking about the same issues that happened then today? What's your name?
My name is Lillian Carter.
Mom.
Thank you. I'm from that era, and this was a difficult movie to watch. I came with a question in my mind. What is it now? Is it just a matter of choice? I have 4 children. I have worked in mental health. I have worked with kids. I have worked with homes, and I'm always teaching. And my question is, looking at that film I saw, no, it's not over. We are still in slavery. We're still in bondage. If I go over to Westwood where my daughters live, go to a Ralph's over there, totally different. I come back to Long Beach, it's different. My question is, when I look around, where are the children? That film, I will be the first one to take them to the schools. Like one said, about 3 years old, first grade, third grade. I have been to the schools. You have kids there that are at Atlas. Why are they at Atlas? They got a jacket on already, so when they get to elementary, they get to high school, they're going to have a problem. So this is what I'm saying. Yes, this is real. And it's not over. We are still in slavery. And it's not just a matter, thank you for helping me see. It's not just a matter of if I change my mind. You know, it's a matter of us getting educated and becoming aware and teaching our children, because most of our children don't even know anything about slavery.
Thank you so much. Why is that? Can you answer that question? Why are kids not being taught about this issue in schools today?
It's not in the books. It's simply not in the books. Our educators have taken it out of our history books. It's skimmed over. You get 1 page. They may put a little bit about Harriet Tubman in there. A little bit about Abraham Lincoln, but you get very, very minimum taught in the schools.
Now, does it go back to what I was saying earlier about the executive who said, it's overdue. Why do you don't need to be talking about this?
Exactly. People want to forget. They don't want to talk about the painful past. It's over. It's 200 years ago. We had the civil rights movement, kumbaya. We all get along. We don't want to bring up any of that stuff from the past. We need to get along. We don't want any more riots. Everybody love peace, love, happiness. My 2 daughters are children who believe that everybody is great together, and I really had to have a talk with them and tell them, wait a minute, I don't want you to be racist, I don't want you to be prejudiced, but I want you to understand the history of our people. I want you to know, yes, there was racism, there still is racism, because quite frankly, I want you to recognize it. When something happens to you, yeah, it's real, because I don't want you to have a rude awakening. Sometimes our children don't understand what is happening to them because they are not taught the history.
Thank you so much, brother. What's your name?
My name is Sadia Campbell.
Question, sir.
I don't have a question, I have a response.
Respond.
We can't respond to what they're saying?
I said you could not.
Okay, I'm asking.
Okay. We need to love each other, bro.
When we talk about whether this is still going on today, it's definitely going on today. You got wall-to-wall brothers in these jails and prisons in this country right now. And if you're going to show a film like this, you got a captive audience. You got people locked up in cells and they don't have nothing. You got a TV right there and you show this stuff to them if that's what your task is. But one of the things I think you have to understand is that the nature of this economic system was based on slavery. And profit is the motivating force. And whenever you have a people who grow up in a system like that, they're going to have a predator nature. When you grow up in a system where it's a dog-eat-dog world, look out for number one. Profit is the motivating force. You don't do nothing unless it's profit. Okay. I taught at Cal State Long Beach, and you have athletes coming through. I remember somebody said something about the athletes. And they bring a paper around for you to sign that you're going to give this person a seat. No less than to see whether he comes to class or not. I refused to sign it. I had football players and basketball players coming through there, and I wouldn't sign the paper. They got kind of upset with me. I said, no, I'm not doing it. I think your education is more than whether or not you play ball or not. And these cats come around to me to this day. They're so glad that they had my class because they took the class. I also am a Vietnam
So in other words, you didn't take the cattle idea when you looked at African American.
I would not sign that. It was ridiculous. I thought it was ridiculous. I think the most important thing people get is an education. I didn't know that initially. That's why I ended up in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam with a brother named Geronimo Pratt. I was on death row when Geronimo Pratt was on trial for his life. And he got convicted. And there was no way I could reach out and tell them that that man was in Oakland, because I was at the same meeting he was in. The meeting that he was in, they had a place where they had all veterans met in one room, away from everybody else, to talk about strategy for how we were going to move forward as the Black Panther Party. Geronimo was a highly decorated veteran. This man spent 27 years in prison, 27 years in prison for something he did not do, and they knew he didn't do it when he was first locked up. So you got a system that's corrupt and don't give a damn about us.
I hear you, brother.
Yeah, system.
Mr. Gray, when we look at, Judge Tucker said a few minutes ago, perhaps we should use sports as a model. Should we?
Yeah, sports are fine, but if you can't read, it doesn't matter. You have too many kids who can't read. One of the things I did for the police office, we did prior mentioned youth service. We help with the kids with things like here you have probably shortstop here in Long Beach and other things like that. It doesn't matter if they can't read. And that's where our school system is failing our kids. Because what happened is, my brother here was saying, pass them along, pass them along, pass them along. As long as they can run fast and jump high and do things like the Jimmy the Greek, syndrome from several years ago, we don't care. But when it comes down to them being able to read and write, the guy that played for the Washington Redskins a bunch of years ago was a professional football player. All of a sudden came out after him being his last name is Man. Dexter Manley. Couldn't read.
Could not read.
Couldn't read. Was a millionaire playing sports, but he couldn't read. And that's what we have in prison. We have so many of our young men. The illiteracy rate in prison is staggering. And when you come out, they can't get a job. They can't barely fill out an application. So they've got, talk about the strikes. They got strikes against them already. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I'm sitting here.
Oh, brother, you
jerk off like I can't help myself.
You went way past answering the question. So you got deep, dog. So keep doing.
I just had to, like Sly says, boom shakalaka, which
Boom shakalaka, baby. Congresswoman Richards, go right ahead.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to head out. I've got to do 2 more Juneteenth, but let me provide a positive suggestion of what I think we can do.
Okay.
Assuming issues still exist, which I believe that they do, let me give you some ideas of what we can do right here. I said that we were able to change the sentencing, change the rules regarding drugs. That happened because there are 43 members of Congress called the Congressional Black Caucus who saw what was happening in their community, who ran for office, who continually fought year after year and finally got it changed. I'm looking here, many of you I've seen before. We just had an election right here in North Long Beach. 30,000 people are registered to vote. Only 3,500 people voted. 3,500.
Why is that?
Over 30,000 are registered. So I'm going to say that there are things we can do, but we have to do more of what some of you are doing. I see Ernest McBride Jr., his son who's here, his father helped integrate the city of Long Beach by taking his children who are educated to help them apply for jobs to begin to integrate the telephone company. So why is it that we're not coming to the meetings? Some of you are, but we need to do more of it. Come to the meetings, go to the city halls and to say, we don't want to have disparities here in the city of Long Beach. Go to county meetings, go to state meetings, go to federal meetings and say, the injustices that we currently see must change.
Congresswoman, why do you think this is happening? Why do you think, from what I'm hearing from you, that there's this incredible sense of apathy in the community? Why is this?
I think people are busy taking care of their own issues, their own homes, their own jobs, their own families, and they're not making the sacrifice that we saw here. They're not making that sacrifice to say, okay, maybe I'm not going to get X, but I'm going to stand up for someone else. And I want to encourage you that those of you who are here, keep coming to the meetings and keep holding people accountable to be able to make a difference and to fix it.
Round of applause for the Congress.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Hold on, brother. This brother has what's your
Great comments.
question, or you got something?
Yes, I do have a question, but first of all,
Directed at any particular person?
yes, the prosecutor on the left, I took exception to when she said all African American men having a record or something like that.
Are you talking about
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Ms. Anderson.
Okay, so Ms. Anderson, he's got a question for you, and you heard something. Let's make sure you heard you correctly. What did you think?
It was in reference to her daughters, finding, and mostly African American men that did not have a record and was not in prison.
So basically,
Mentioned all, and that's when I got a little hot, because it doesn't apply to me.
well, I don't
It
think
doesn't apply to some other brothers in the world.
brother, I've never been locked up. I'll tell you that right now. So he's basically saying that just a few minutes ago when you were talking about your daughters finding a suitable mate, African American mate, that you had indicated that you had told your daughters all brothers have a record. Okay, you want to clarify that?
I know she didn't mean to say it.
Clean it up.
No.
She said. Go ahead, sister.
I'm not saying that all African Americans have the record. That wasn't my intent, and that was not my statement.
African American men.
Not African American men. I'm saying that the system is so tainted, and that African American men are being locked up in drones. And some of the, way the system is set, that they're coming out with felony records. And with our population and the numbers being that, what are the chances of my daughters finding an African American mate that doesn't have a felony conviction? Their odds are very low.
She's not lying, bro.
And that's what I'm talking about. And a lot of our African American females, they're trying to find a mate. You pick up any Cosmopolitan magazine, Women's magazine, any of the magazines out there are talking about the statistics of African American women who are single, trying to find an African American man without a record is hard.
Any single sisters in the house?
Yeah.
Huh? Yes? Raise your hand. Okay, we'll get to you in a second. And you're so beautiful too. What's up? Go ahead. What's your name?
My name is Nisha Stasia. I'm a resident of Long Beach.
Question, or do you have something?
I do have a question, but I want to make a statement first and then lead into the question.
Let's not go way
I
over.
won't go too far off. I won't go far off at all, hopefully. I'm thankful for this film, and I couldn't, while watching it, I could not help keep from thinking about how many people who don't know the history of African Americans, especially males. And I think about education. And what the judge was saying was how it starts so early with it doesn't matter male or female, the desire starts to wane as children get older. And the question is, why Why does that happen? Well, there was a statement about African American males not in the home. Thankfully, and I'm thankful to God that my husband is in the home with our children, raising our son and daughter. I have the same concern and think about my daughter as far as who she will allow to be her husband. But my concern is for the males, and I'm thankful for you males who are here, but the education that goes out to our children is not geared towards looking back and using what we have gone through to move forward, but instead it's so focused on power and achievement. And the question is how can we bring back more education about what has happened in our past so that we can see, you see what's going on now today, it's been going on for hundreds of years. How can we bring that education back to actually raising our children to see that the problem is not knowing where we've come from? I'm sorry.
Beautiful sister. Judge Tucker, can you try to answer that for this beautiful
Because we
sister?
do so much testing.
I think the churches have a big role here. And the reason I say that is I don't think, we can pressure the school district and so forth to include various materials about our history in the curriculum. But I think the churches should be used to have it as an alternative school system in terms of the reason I say that is I think we have to take it on ourselves to teach black kids black history. See, the Chinese parents teach Chinese kids their history and so forth, and Jewish kids teach Jewish kids their history in schools, and it seems to me that the churches can be a source of motivation and a source of information in terms of our history, because I think a lot of this deals with motivation.
Is it because is one of the reasons that these ethnic groups that you speak of are able to teach their children history is because their children have a sense of value when they think about their history? When we look at our African American youth, do they even have a sense of value when they look at their history, or is their history not even agreeing with them?
Well, the parents have an obligation to teach them. Young people can't teach history. Parents have to teach history.
But that brings me back to...
But let me just say this. I had very great success with the young people under my jurisdiction getting high school diplomas and GEDs. Now, almost all these kids, a large percentage of them, had committed a crime. And it seems to me that I took no excuses for an answer. They had to get a high school diploma if they were a senior, or a GED. And they had to get a C in every course if they were not a senior. And we had a lot of them going to college, junior college, and we had a lot of them getting high school diplomas.
Outstanding.
And the reason is motivation. And the court provided the motivation because they didn't get off probation. If they missed school, they could go into custody. Now everybody can't be on probation, or they should be. They should not be. But the thing is, it seems to me we can't just say how bad things are. Things have been bad, they'll continue to be bad. What we have to do is take responsibility in our own community to, and the churches, it seems to me, are a logical resource to educate our kids.
Thank you, brother.
One thing I'd like to add on to that, though, is as far as the churches are concerned, you know what? Speaking to some of this pastor, go to the pastor and say, this is a program that we'd love to see implemented in our church. Can we do this? Tell you, Pastor, they'd love to. Okay, you want to do something? Fine. And you have these after school programs that kids, because what's happening, because funding's been cut back so much from the schools, schools would love to have a program for kids that they can send the kids to, and the churches are always the ones that are always in the community. They've been there and they remain there as a place. That's why you have things like the faith-based initiatives and things like that, because the churches are always there. So put together programs and you want to say to the pastors, we want to start this here in our church. Can you do this? And then you will talk to the principal. The principals will say, a program at a church for kids, we'd love to see it happen. So we can take action for the things that are happening. Also, get people, that's why I got to say this now, get folks out to vote. Get people out to vote. It's everybody's responsibility in here. All of us it's our responsibility to encourage someone else to get out to vote. I'm not trying to sound to go on one political party versus another, but I do understand that there's one particular party that says that there's enough teachers in our urban system already. We don't give more money to the schools. We have to take more money from the schools. There's one candidate that says that. And I'm not going to say anything about that governor because I'm not going to list his name. But we can do more to empower on a local level all the things we're doing. Being here, thank you, John Malvo. Do it again. Have more people out.
Well said, brother. This sister here, round of applause. This is a single sister here, very beautiful sister. You've had a difficult time finding a brother. What's been the most difficult part of this search?
I'm not really searching, but
I'm sorry.
I'm a college student. I'm a college student, but I mean, I do think about that, getting education. I know they say the more education of Black women gets, the difficult finding a partner, but I do see that as being a problem in the future as well as our daughters.
Well said. And look, we're going to wrap it up here. We got to wrap it up. When we look at solutions, Ms. Anderson, what should we be looking at?
Well, I think as a solution, I think, first of all, African American families need to look to themselves as the primary teacher of their children. I think that no one should ever rely on the school system. I always took my children to the museums, to the library, and taught them in their house, and made sure I was right up at that school to know everything that's happening. Because if you don't, you will fail. You can't rely on anyone but yourselves. And then the other thing is, take every opportunity to go up to the schools where you have the opportunity. It's Black History Month. Tell them about this film. Tell them you want to show them to the kids in the school. Go to your pastors.
Mr. Gray, last word, solutions.
Get involved, stay involved, take responsibility. People will say, well, everybody will do something. Well, if everybody does something, nothing gets done. It's my responsibility there's an each one, reach one kind of a thing. So each person take responsibility. Wherever there is a place for you to take action, you got to take action because it's imperative. I'm not stuff to say right now. I'm sorry.
Judge Tucker,
develop yourself to be competitive.
Develop yourself to be competitive. A round of applause for all of you. Basically out of time. Thank you so much. Young, this is where it all starts. It's very cool. Thank you.
I thought it was a good film. I think that one of the things we have to realize, though, is that it made it look like it's something that happened. It makes it look like it's something that happened when I was a kid, but that's still going on right now. We have so many political prisoners in the jails and prisons in this country right now. It's ridiculous.
The call of action that I have is what I do for a living. I educate. And that means sitting down and having conversations, doing research, spending more than 90 seconds that you get in a commercial or a 3-second soundbite that you would get in a political speech, but actually sitting down with family and friends, having study group conversations, reading books that connect to the subject, writing one's own memoirs, writing one's own stories, interviewing your own family about what their experiences were, so that you will know just how far we've come, what we really can celebrate, and how much further we have to go in order to be truly first-class citizens in this country.